I'm Davide, and I will be presenting experimental investigation of space plasma thrusters via data-driven analysis techniques under the supervision of Mario Martinez and Filippo Terragni. So, what is the motivation for this? Plasma oscillations, as Enrique has already underlined before, are something that happens in many fields of application, from electric propulsion to fusion reactor, astrophysics, and much more. They can affect the way your device behaves and the performances of whatever device you have by basically hampering sometimes also its functioning. One example is the anomalous transport that has been mentioned before, which is one long-lasting open question of Hall effect thrusters, in which cross-field transport predicted by the models is orders of magnitude lower than the one actually detected by experiments. In my thesis, I will be studying mostly three different types of devices, so ranging from Hall effect thrusters to other types of devices that basically are called electrodeless plasma thrusters, which basically have no electrode in contact with the plasma, which is an advantage because then you can potentially increase the durability of your device. Two of those are the helicon plasma thruster and the electron cyclotron resonance thruster, which are basically both using a magnetic nozzle to accelerate the plasma, but they use different ways of ionizing the plasma. One is using helicon waves, the other one is exploiting the cyclotron resonance of the electrons to ionize the fluid. Oscillations in Hall effect thrusters are more characterized than the newer devices, simply because they're more mature, but again, we still have open questions. In my thesis, to characterize this oscillation, I'm using mostly data-driven algorithms, because usually dealing with raw data, both coming from simulation and experiment, can be difficult because of noise, dynamic superposition, and also the question of are you interpreting your data correctly? So the point is trying to use these techniques to help the researcher to uncover hidden dynamics in the data and help reduce research bias. First part of my thesis focused on analyzing simulation of a Hall effect thruster that were produced through an internal code that we have, a hyphen, in which I have analyzed three different conditions for the device: one, the nominal condition, one with the lower discharge voltage, and another one with higher mass flow rate injected. We have used a high-order DMD to analyze these simulations, aside from POD, but I will not be showing here. High-order DMD is an enhanced version of the classic DMD, which allows you to detect nonlinearities in a better way, which in turn is based off an extension of the Fourier analysis. I have identified two different clusters: the blue one, the breathing mode, and the red one, the ITT mode, which are basically two dynamics belonging to two different structures. The high-order DMD allows you to separate those. We have reconstructed the original dataset by only considering the two modes in the two different clusters. The first one, basically, you can see the predator-prey model of the breathing mode, in which basically the density, plasma density predates on the neutral density. You can see it on the left plot. Whereas the ITT is mostly a traveling wave, traveling towards the right of your simulation, so outer. And you can see basically four different phases of the oscillation in the plot on the right. Second part of my thesis was focused on analyzing oscillation in a helicon plasma thruster that we have here at UC3M. I've used an array of three different Langmuir probes that are displaced in space in order to allow you to reconstruct the wave number vector. Basically, in my case, the zeta direction and the theta direction. Zeta basically is approximately the direction of parallel to the magnetic field line locally, whereas the theta direction is the cross B direction, so the one rotating along the plume. We have identified mostly two oscillations. The one at 3-4 kilohertz that can be detected very close to the thruster exhaust. In fact, it kind of disappears when you move farther down. And another one that is visible farther downstream, and when you are basically more off of the center line at higher angles alpha, you can see that this has, on the right, it has a mostly azimuthal structure with negligible axial propagation. We've seen this oscillation basically taking place also at other positions in the plasma, always when farther downstream and off the center line. And we have compared, you can see here, like the gray lines here and on the right, basically compare this experimental dispersion relation with the analytical solutions, namely based on parametric study and previous works. Parametric study, because we have seen this oscillation has lower hybrid characteristics, because it means that it falls in the range of lower hybrid frequencies and phase velocities. You can see the lower hybrid here on the right plot. Namely, these analytical solutions were the ones for the modified Samanoid stability, lower hybrid drift instability, and magnetosonic wave. Unfortunately, these dispersion relations provide with fully real solution, therefore not justifying the rising of any instability here. Third part of my thesis was done in collaboration with ONERA in their experimental facilities in Palaiseau, in which we have basically used an improved setup of what we used here at ONERA at UC3M. We use now 4 different Langmuir probes, a curling probe, which is basically a novel type of diagnostics developed at ONERA, and a fast camera to basically detect light in the chamber of the device on an ECR thruster here. 4 probes, because now we are also resolving the basically the radial direction. We have identified now, again, 2 different oscillations. The first one at 9 kilohertz, which basically seems to be unaffected by the position of the probe. Its strength is very consistent along the plume, and also the frequency was very consistent. It was always around 9 kilohertz. The second one is basically like at around 60 kilohertz, and it seemed to be enhanced when moving outward from the plume. But this is still like work that we have to confirm. I've also analyzed the structure of these modes. You can see on the bottom there are the dispersion plots similar to what I've done before. That they suggest that there may not be any preferential direction in which these oscillations tend to propagate in space, because as you can see, the wave numbers tend to be all around 0, and there's no clear structure that I may deem relevant and for me to claim anything in terms of propagation. Results for camera and CP are still in development from my colleagues, so I will not be showing them here. We have also performed parametric analysis by changing operating conditions for these oscillations. We have on the top right, you see changes of the mass flow rate. Top left, changes of the mass flow rate. Top right, changes of power injected. Bottom left, changes of driving frequency, and bottom right, like repeatability. So we have also tested whether these oscillations were pretty consistent throughout different days of measurements, and they are. Changes in mass flow rate seemed to not affect basically the 2 oscillations much, especially the low frequency oscillation is not affected in terms of frequency. It seemed to be enhanced in terms of power at 1.4 SCCM, and it seemed to disappear when you increase the mass flow rate beyond like 2 SCCM more or less. Whereas the high frequency oscillations tends to lower in frequency. You can see it's moving to the left by increasing the mass flow rate. Changes of power did not affect much the dynamics, whereas changes of the driving frequency did. Interestingly enough, the changes of the driving frequency changes the region where the resonance in the chamber happens, which means this could be related to an ionization type of instability. In fact, you can see that when you go to 2.0 gigahertz, the high frequency oscillation completely disappears, and the strength of this oscillation is enhanced by several orders of magnitude, and the trigger of many harmonics of this oscillation appears. Whereas for higher frequency driving frequency, the intensity of the lower oscillation decreases, and the intensity of the high frequency one increases. Research activities for my thesis included basically participation of 2 conferences, one in 2021 and 2023, 1 publication of a journal paper based on the first part of my thesis, and participation of the E-B plasma workshop that was basically held in Madrid in 2022. Upcoming, we have participation to a conference, IBC, in June, basically next month, in which I will present the collaboration with ONERA, and possibly the publication of 2 journal articles based on the last 2 parts of my thesis, and then thesis defense. Thank you. And